Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about It's the Way You Say It by Fleming. This is a book that is on speech and communication, and the two are different. In this review, we're going to talk about, first of all, kind of brief overview of the book. Then we're going to talk about why speech is important, and then we'll go through the ratings. Okay, so brief overview of the book. She covers a lot of different information. The first beginning part of it, she is covering the speech itself, the mechanical qualities, vocal exercises you can do to change your speech. She deeply advocates for doing something proactively and also attending to recordings of your own speech. So you make a speech recording, you listen to it, and this is an essential element for her for both evaluating and making progress. Notably, it's kind of coming full circle in a way for me, because this book is why I started doing YouTube in general, because this way I would force myself to listen to my voice, and it seemed like a killing two birds with one stone type of thing all those many years ago when I first read this book. Notably, there's a second edition now. There wasn't when I had first read it. Okay. And so she talks about, mechanical qualities, how to develop, a lower pitch voice, higher pitch voice, when you have speech that's choppy, these sorts of things. And then in some later chapters, she starts talking about other stuff that's related to communication, but isn't about just the mechanical qualities itself. She is by background a speech pathologist, but she talks about, using simple declarative statements, which is obviously that's not a mechanical thing in speech, but it is an important part of communication, because oftentimes people can share, a whole bunch of information that's not pertinent, relevant, or, any kind of adjective germane to the discussion at hand. And this can mean poor communication as a result. Like oftentimes, for example, an example she uses is we like to communicate information as it happened to us in terms of like a timeline. And so often when we are narrating a story, we tell all the details of the story, not just the relevant ones, because we're going through the story in our head, when in fact we should just tell the relevant ones. Maybe that was an example of that. But so, and then she also talks about, the consistency and congruence between your body language and also your communication, and how, carrying yourself well and presenting yourself well is an essential element of communication, which I think is correct. And it is sort of more, you could see it's more holistic type of approach, because she's definitely covering like kind of all the bases, even though her primary, purview is being a speech pathologist. And then she also talks about business and provides a bunch of examples at the end. She provides a bunch of examples throughout, and this is kind of what the book's about. And okay, well, why should we be caring about this? What's important? These sorts of things. And I think that, information, whenever you're processing information, you're never processing unfiltered information. It's always going through some sort of filter. If it's on like Instagram or TikTok or in a reel or these types of things, it's in a sort of filter of this high velocity, sort of thing. Often there's like special effects and like speech, and like even if you look to the side here, right? Information is being presented in a way that's formatted and mediated by design, right? In this case, it's the rather amateurish designs of my graphic design of my like formatting here, but it's presenting information and it's conveying information, and it's there's no such thing as neutrally presented information devoid of context. And if you study, typography, you will get this in a bit more of a profound, you experience this idea in a bit more of a profound way, where, for example, if you eliminate all the spaces between words, it becomes incredibly difficult to read anything. And the spaces are a form of presentation, right? And it is a form of presentation we look through, and we don't often notice, but we do look through it. Same with punctuation. If you get rid of punctuation, everything's much harder to read, and it is a sort of filtering that you look through, but it doesn't mean we're not looking through it. Well, okay, what does this all come down to? When you are conveying information with your words, the way you are speaking conveys extra information in such a way that you should probably attend to it, and you think you are presenting a sort of neutral stream of information, but that's not the case. You are presenting information that's mediated through your own speech, and so you have to let's say, take the glasses off, the glasses of filtration, and look at the device you have, which is, your voice, to convey information and this sort of thing. That way you can ensure that you are conveying the type of information you want. The message that is being received might not be what you want to send out as a consequence of how you speak. And if this is the case, you should be changing how you speak, not trying to change the substance or the actual words you are using. And so I think this is really important. And I think it's also something that almost never gets discussed. So this is kind of why I think this book's an important book. As I say with almost every interview, with every single review, this was actually a difficult book to review because I am uncertain. There aren't a lot of books that are similar to this that I was able to find when I was looking for books like this. And so it is difficult for me to, in a vacuum, this book might not be the most well-written or the most highest utility, but the fact that there aren't a lot of other books like it, and I think it communicates important information, makes it so that it's going to be a pretty strong recommendation from me, at least. So let's get into the ratings and talk about why. For utility, I gave it an 8, for reasons that I think I kind of already touched on, but it's mainly that communicating information to other people is going to be an essential element of your life. You do that with your voice. You should at least at some point in time take some look at your voice. And perhaps I should have scored this even higher on utility. The only reason I didn't is because I am not necessarily as familiar. I've only read a few other books on speech, and so I don't feel super comfortable with the space to know that this is the book to recommend. But I think that if you exist in a social world and you never think about your speech at all, that this is an error and it should be rectified. And I think that this is a good book for rectifying it, which is why I recommend it on an 8. Especially there's a lot of stuff, when she talks about the communication stuff, that I think can be valuable to some people in a way that's difficult to discern how valuable it might not be valuable to everyone. So, for example, in the section on small talk, she discusses, how, for the most part, small talk is just vapid. And what you're communicating is not really about the weather. That's not really what the meaning of the communication you're making is. It's that I'm cool, I'm not a psychopath, we can have a conversation, we can vibe, and we can talk about, information that's relevant to the two of us, and we can have an interaction. The true substance of the interaction is not how the weather is, right? It's that, we might have some shared experience and we might want to have a discussion. It's more about the socialization. And if you are of the opinion you don't want to have any vapid conversation ever, and this sort of thing, it might go over your head. For example, that small talk's really not about the substance of what you're talking about. And if you ever complain about small talk being vapid, you're probably missing the point of the small talk, which is it's a demonstration of sociability, not a sort of communication of information. And so in instances like that, if this is not something you're necessarily aware of or conscientious of, that might not be the right word, then this book will be extremely valuable, right? Also, if you have elements of your speech or your voice that you wanted to change, this book will be extremely valuable. But it might not necessarily be super high. The reason I didn't score it super high on utility is I think you can also get this stuff elsewhere, but you can get it here. Okay, for novelty, I gave it an 8, not because it's necessarily really hard information to find. I don't think, last time I looked though, there isn't too much out there on, vocal stuff in the book sphere. And this is why I had a really hard time rating novelty. A lot of it's not in the book sphere. I imagine there's a lot more videos on it, and you can also see a speech pathologist, for example, and in person is probably just generally better than a book format for this type of information anyways, or if not in person, over things about your voice, right, are probably best conveyed in a medium that allows the hearing of voices. So an oral medium, not a, paper medium. And so because of this, I think that I was uncertain how to rate it on novelty, because as far as books go, there's really not a lot of books in this sphere, but I think that there's a lot of information. It's just not in books. And maybe I should have looked a little harder before doing this review, but here we are, almost through it. For entertainment, I gave it a 5.5. She provides a lot of anecdotes and examples, and these are somewhat relatable, but also kind of give you an idea of the, let's say, era that she's from. You can kind of tell that she is an old soul, let's say, but they're entertaining. They also demonstrate and illustrate the point, and using a story to convey the information is going to make it, both more entertaining and also more readable, and I think she does that successfully. And also, in terms of performance, demonstrating the content, towards the end she actually even talks about when you're conveying information, it's better to do it through a story. Which I found amusing, but that's like in the section where she talks about business. But okay. For style, I gave it a 5.5. Her writing style, it's okay. It's clear, it's concise, it's nothing to write home about, but she gets the information across. Right, for readability, I gave it a 7.5. This is partially on the back of her style being slightly positive, and also because she uses stories. There aren't any really visual aids or visual organization of information, other than, sections and this sort of thing, which there are sections, but there's not any sort of extra oomph that for me kind of drives up the readability, as well as the fact that I don't think the information she was conveying was extremely complex. And so, to some degree, readability is a function of how well you convey information relative to its complexity, and I don't think that this was necessarily a standout. For interest, I gave it a 6. This was a weird one to score. I think stuff related to the voice is interesting, but it might not be interesting for everyone. And some of the stories are a little bit interesting, but it's not something crazy where you read it and you're just like, wow, right? It's not, how should I say? It's like a briefer history of time. You read that and you're like, whoa, dude, that's crazy. It's not one of those. But the information is interesting. It's interesting largely because of its relevance and perhaps its novelty to just kind of things that you might not think about as it relates to, interaction. As far as recommendations go, if I would actually pretty strongly recommend this or something else that I can't necessarily name, anything on speech really, or examining, your own communication skills, to anyone who has not already done this. Just full stop, a very broad recommendation that this is I think this is an element of like human life that is very easy to overlook and should perhaps not be overlooked. If conveying information is important to you, and perhaps working on your voice, which is the medium through which you can convey information, is important to you, you should really read this. And if you've never considered doing that, I think this is a good shout. I am very, very, very willing to accept that there's a better piece of book or video tutorial series or something like this on this sort of thing, but I don't know what it is. And so with that in mind, very broadly would recommend it, with the asterisk that if someone were to tell me something else, I would be, pretty willing to accept how should I say, the book was not, the writing style and the, the kerpow of the information was not incredibly robust. It doesn't strike me, she doesn't strike me as an extremely powerful author, although I imagine she's very interesting to communicate with in person. And so, would very, very broadly recommend with that asterisk, as I had said. As far as conversation goes, or discussion in the comments, if anyone has any other sorts of pieces of information or books or stuff like this within this sort of sphere, and they would like to recommend it, please do. Because I am always happy to hear these sorts of things. I'm actually fascinated by body language and tonality and speech in general. I really always mean to do more of this sort of thing. I think this might be, in terms of performance, reflecting on the content or the content of performance, conveying information about the thing. I didn't think of how I was going to word that sentence before I started on it, which is perhaps ironic because what I'm talking about is I think in this video I probably say like or fewer than I do in any of my other videos, because I'm very conscious about it when talking about speech in general, which I found kind of amusing, but then I fumbled it at the end there. But if you like this video, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I might suggest that you click away from videos you don't like with more expedience. And you can, of course, next time you see one of my videos, if you never want to see me again, click the triple dot and click Don't Recommend This Channel, and you won't see me again. But have a good day. Bye-bye.